Hello, this is Teri Takai, and I'm a Senior Vice President for the Center for Digital Government. And I'm here today with Lydia Payne-Johnson, who's the Director of IT Security, Identity Management, and Cybersecurity Risk at George Washington University. Lydia has an extensive background in both private and public sector, which we're going to talk to her about in a minute, as an executive with experience in compliance, cybersecurity risk, data governance, and consumer marketing. Lydia, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Teri. It's so good to see you again.
All right, so let's get started. You know, one of the things I think that has always I've been so impressed and fascinated by is your background, Lydia. I mean, you were a Senior Vice President and the Director of Global Advertising at Dean Witter Reynolds Incorporated for 18 years, before becoming a Chief Privacy Officer. And that's for multiple corporations. So you've really made some interesting and major career shifts. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what prompted that career shift? And, you know, what advice would you have to some of those in our audience as they may be thinking to make a move into the areas of privacy and security from other roles?
Sure. Sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time. But in my particular instance, I had gone to law school, just come out off of graduating from law school at night, 4 years. And I was working in advertising, and lo and behold, there was this thing called privacy compliance that suddenly financial institutions had to adhere to. And no one knew anything about it. It was the year 1999. And so I was approached by the Associate General Counsel he said, you know what, you have this background in marketing, and we have to send out this privacy notice and give our clients an opportunity to see how we collect their information and who we share it with, but also the opportunity to opt out. And so we don't want them to opt out. And since you know how we communicate with our clients via, whether it's our television ads or radio ads or any of our other brochures or marketing materials, we figured that you're a good person for that. But the other part of it is that we also need somebody who has a legal background, because we need somebody that is able to kind of ingest what some of these requirements are. And then he said, so you're the new Chief Privacy Officer. That was the conversation.
But, you know, one of the things that's so important about what you said, Lydia, is that it's not only right place, right time. It's the willingness to jump in and take a bit of a risk.
Yes.
To take a position that maybe nobody has had before. That in of itself is really a statement on kind of being brave and being out there and willing to take those risks.
Yes, and so the thing is, there wasn't a roadmap for a Chief Privacy Officer. And as a little aside, you know, a lot of my peers at that time, at least in the financial services industry, I would say if you did a poll, about 80% of us were women and came out of marketing.
Interesting.
Yes. So because again, there wasn't a roadmap, this was brand new. And the firms thought of this more as a marketing issue and less as a legal or compliance issue. And so over the next 20 years, we see that it has morphed into something a whole lot different. So I would say, you know, the ability to pivot in your career, I think for women who are looking to get into cybersecurity or get into compliance or looking to make a shift, is that willingness to take that chance, take that leap of faith, the willingness to learn something new, the willingness to take that risk. And so what were the skills? The skills that I think you kind of need to do that is to be analytical. I think that, if you're a problem solver, if you know how to solve problems, you don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert. But how do you kind of leverage what you're already bringing to the table to help create this new role, or to help spur you forward to that next level?
Lydia, I think that kind of set of statements is so important, because I think sometimes we think, well, maybe I don't know everything there is about this area. But you're absolutely right. The skills that you just talked about are things that, many women have those skills already, and they don't necessarily think about how they can leverage those moving into a new area. Now, let's continue that a little bit, because you've clearly gone beyond privacy, and now you're actually in the cybersecurity space and the cyber risk space as well. So how did you make that transition, and what were some of the skills that you leveraged as you were kind of expanding your portfolio?
Well, the ability to really read regulations and interpret them. I leveraged a lot of the relationships that I had with business within Dean Witter and then in other companies. And that's really critical. And I think women can do a really good job at relationship building and getting buy-in, right? It's not a sales job, but rather how can you help to distill what needs to be done, and also balance out what does the business need, and show that you understand that the business need to it, and help to strike that balance and negotiate that. It was a lot of going to conferences, privacy conferences, as well, and meeting people in the security space. It was getting, certified, right, in the security space, but also talking to the people in the company who work in IT. Okay, because they're very important, whether it's privacy compliance or it's cyber risk. They're very, very important to the equation. And so it is about reaching across that aisle and making those contacts with the security people, the network people, the developers, and they'll teach you. If you ask them, they'll teach you. They're not just nerds that are just sitting there with pens in their pockets and their heads are down. Right? But it is that, and it is this sort of proactive approach to gathering all of that information, reading articles, signing up for organizations that are putting out materials, and getting the buy-in from your company to pay for you to go and take courses and get certified and what have you. It's a win-win for them and for you.
That's fantastic. I love the advice about partnering and not trying to do it all yourself, or thinking that you have to know it all yourself. I'm sure, Lydia, that you mentor any number of women at all different kinds of ages. And I think sometimes we kind of step back maybe, and we don't really represent ourselves well, or we may second guess who we are. So as you're talking to some of the women that you mentor, what's the advice that you give them about how to make sure that they're representing themselves well, and that they're valuing themselves for everything that they can do?
It's an excellent question. First of all, I think to represent themselves well, I always tell them, do your homework. Because we as women always have to come to the table with just a little bit more in terms of what we know. Find your voice, okay? And I know that's not easy for a lot of women, particularly, there are certain cultures that they don't encourage women to speak up. And so it's finding your voice. And you don't always have to find your voice in a large conference room or on a large Zoom call. You can find that person that maybe that's a senior person that you can latch on to, who you can talk with and share what your plans are, what your goals are, or even if you have to do a presentation, to practice it in front of them, get that input. I also advise them to get their own board of directors, as I call it. And the board of directors are people from different walks of your life who you trust, who who are going to give you good advice, that you can reach out to them depending upon what it is. You might have one that helps you in terms of how you dress. You might have one that will help you in terms of how you project or how you speak. You may have one that will be your advisor when you run into an issue at work in terms of how to go about solutioning it, whether it's solutioning the problem itself or even just the people side of it, how to manage that. And that's your board of directors. Nobody else needs to know who they are. They don't even have to know each other. But that strategically, that's what you need to do. That's what I advise young women and other women to do in terms of, you want to get ahead, you've got to build this car as you're driving it, right? I also recommend to young women to don't be afraid to show who you are. Be yourself. Don't be afraid. Don't think that I'm too smart. Don't be afraid to just be you. Show up your authentic self.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm sure, Teri, you've had this situation where you've said something in a meeting, a lot of men in the room, and you get crickets, right? And then, like,
I can relate to that, Lydia.
5 minutes later, one of the men says exactly what you said, and they all say, that's a great idea. Okay. Yeah. I also advise young women, don't take it personally. Okay. If you take it personally, it's going to distract you.
I love those pieces of advice, Lydia. And actually, as you were saying it, I was kind of ticking through who my board of directors would be. I think I got to be a little bit better organized on that. But I want to reinforce your message about not taking things personally. I think that is just a real critical skill that we as women have to cultivate and get used to. Couldn't agree with you more. I wanted to shift a little bit because, the last couple of years particularly have been tough years for young women, or certainly not necessarily young women, but, women who have other obligations, whether it's from the parent standpoint, from a children's standpoint, but particularly with trying to juggle schools and quarantine and all of those kinds of things. And so as a single mother who has had these like amazingly high pressure positions, what kind of advice would you give as, individuals are trying to juggle that, making sure that they're fulfilling their commitments in their home life, but also being able to move forward from a career perspective?
Yeah. Wow. I think the first thing is that don't get caught up in work-life balance. Okay, you're already doing it. Yeah. Don't judge yourself. Okay, make sure that you take time to exhale and finding those outlets for yourself, whether it's breathing, whether it's walking, whether it's listening to music, but you really do have to always pull back to yourself. And I think that as women, we lose ourselves. It's really it's so easy for us to lose ourselves because we're going in so many different directions. And if the last 2 years hasn't taught us anything, it was that we got whipsawed quite a bit. And you were absolutely right. A lot of pressure has fallen on women to be the caregiver, to be the career woman, to be the mother, with homeschooling, virtual learning. All of a sudden now, they've got kids at home and they've got to be on a Zoom call. They've got to do all of these things. And it's sort of like, okay, when do you find time for yourself?
Yeah.
And I think that is so important. As a single mother, I would make sure that I spent time with my son, that we did things that were fun, things that, he learned. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we found those things that we could go and do and have a good time. And also things that would make him tired so that when we got home, he could fall out. But then I also found things for me. I like to play the piano, and I made sure that I would take time to do that. I still play the piano. But what is your stress buster that you have? And I think that we have to. It's so important these days. I mean, we are seeing women as well as men who are just pushed to the edge.
Yeah.
How do you turn off the noise? And there is a lot of noise. And then, of course, the big challenge is, how do you advance your career? I think that don't be deterred by the fact that we're doing virtual meetings. Nothing really changes, right?
Yeah.
You still have to have that board of directors. You still have to deliver on time. You still have to educate yourself. You still have to, what's your value proposition, your personal value proposition, yes. Right? And you still have to connect with your manager. You still have to communicate and identify for yourself, what's my next move here? What's my next goal? And I would, I think it's a great time to take an inventory, to write down, what are you bringing to the table?
Yeah.
To help you identify, what that next move is. And can you do it? And who do you need to help you do that?
No, that's fantastic. Well, let me just ask you kind of one final question. And I know that this is probably in your long career, kind of a hard one to pick, but what would you say is your single proudest accomplishment over the course, and you're still going, so over the course of all the things that you have done so far, if you had to look at one thing, Lydia, what would that be?
I would say going to law school at night and working during the day, because I was head of advertising at the time. It wasn't easy. And I always say, you're allowed one moment of insanity in your lifetime. And that was my moment of insanity. But it was literally 18-hour days for 4 years straight. But I got through it and I did it. And it served as a springboard career.
Yeah.
So it has paid off 10 times, if not 20 times for me in terms of that. But that's because it helped me to just apply it in so many things, particularly in the cyber security space.
That's fantastic. And I think, Lydia, that's a really good message for all of us, is that sometimes when we do take that extra step, we don't know necessarily all the value that it's going to bring to us. And I mean, it's just, moved you through so many different career steps and into the role that you have today. Well, I can't believe, Lydia, we've come to the end of our time. It's been so great to have you talk with me and share your story. I want to thank all of our listeners today. We're excited to let you know that Lydia will also be participating in Government Technology's upcoming Women in Public Sector Summit, sponsored by Microsoft, on April 27th, 2022. If you're interested in attending, please email Brittany Roberts at broberts@erepublic.com. Lydia, thank you again so much for being here. And we hope we will be seeing you at the conference. And for all of the folks listening in, we look forward to seeing you there too.